Every Muslim is told that celebrating Christmas is strictly forbidden. It's imitating of non-Muslims. But here is the shock. The word Eid appears only once in the entire Quran, and it is not for Muhammad, nor for Ramadan. In chapter 5, verse 114, it is Jesus who prays to Allah, "Send us from heaven a table spread with food as an Eid or feast for the first and last of us." The only Quranic precedent for an Eid is for Jesus. Let that sink in. So how can we call secular Christmas forbidden when the two Eids we do celebrate have no explicit basis for their celebration in the Quran? The Quran commands fasting, Ramadan, and pilgrimage, but there is no verse that explicitly mentions or commands a feast to mark their completion. Here's the reality. There is nothing wrong with taking part in Christmas activities as it stands today. And here's what scholars won't tell you. Muslims have been celebrating alongside Christians for over 1,000 years. The Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt? They officially sponsored Christmas as a public holiday. The Caliph would distribute Christmas gifts, sweets, fish, pastries to government officials and the public. Muslims and Christians celebrated together on the Nile, jumping into the water during Epiphany festivities. The Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad? Muslim poets wrote about Christian holidays. Muslims visited monasteries on feast days, not to convert, just to participate in the celebration. Al-Andalus Muslim Spain? Muslims in cities like Cordoba and Seville exchanged gifts with Christians during the Christmas season. They ate holiday foods together. They attended parties with their Christian neighbors. Even the scholars who tried to forbid it proved the point. Ibn Abdun, a 12th century jurist, wrote an entire legal treatise against Muslims giving Christmas gifts to Christians. Why would he need to write that? Because Muslims were already doing it, widely enough that it bothered him. The strongest evidence against the forbidden ruling comes from the scholars, themselves complaining that Muslims wouldn't stop participating. For over 1,000 years, Muslims celebrated, not because they abandoned Islam, because they understood something that got lost. Islam and community aren't opposites. So what changed? If Muslims celebrated Christmas for over 1,000 years, why are we told it's forbidden now? Because everything shifted in the last 100 years. For centuries, the strict prohibition was a fringe view. Ibn Taymiyyah lived during the Mongol invasions. He saw Muslims adopting non-Muslim practices as a sign of weakness. His fear was understandable in context. But for 500 years after him, most Muslim rulers and scholars ignored his ruling. They preferred coexistence. Then came colonialism. Britain and France colonized the Muslim world. Suddenly, Christmas wasn't just a holiday your Christian neighbor celebrated. It was the holiday of the colonizer. Muslim scholars, trying to preserve Islamic identity under occupation, began reframing participation as cultural surrender. Imitating the West became a betrayal of anti-colonial resistance. Participation in Christian festivals shifted from being a neighborly courtesy to being labeled cultural surrender. Then came the petro-Wahhabi Islam boom of the 70s, where petro-money helped export a certain narrow interpretation of Islam. And then came Google. A young Muslim in 2025 Googles, "Can I celebrate Christmas?" and gets instant fatwa sites saying, "Haram." The internet doesn't show nuance. It doesn't show the 1,000 years of Muslim celebration. It shows the most extreme ruling, amplified and repeated. The prohibition you've been taught isn't ancient Islamic law. It's a recent political invention born from colonialism, weaponized by oil money and solidified by algorithms. The Quran didn't change. Muslims did. So when you hear that Christmas is forbidden, remember, you're not hearing 1,400 years of Islamic tradition. You're hearing the last 50 years of politics. When December 25th comes around, the world celebrates. Your family celebrates. Your coworkers celebrate. Your neighbors celebrate. And you're sitting at home because someone told you it's forbidden. But is it? Christians celebrate Because they believe Jesus is God's Son. That's their reason. But you don't have to adopt their theology to participate in the celebration itself. The Quran speaks about Jesus with extraordinary honor. It says he was born of a virgin. It calls him the Messiah. It recognizes him as righteous and blessed. So just participate. Be part of the joy. Spend time with family. Exchange gifts. Acknowledge the day. It's a secular holiday now. It's more about community, not theology. The Quran is clear. There's no compulsion in religion. You maintain your faith. You respect others' faith. You participate in society. That's it. No grand Muslim Christmas. No theological reclamation. Just don't sit on the sidelines while everyone around you celebrates. You won't become a mushrik. You won't lose your faith. There is nothing in the Quran that forbids participating in the secular aspects of Christmas. What modern Christmas actually is, what most people are actually celebrating on December 25th. Time with family, gift-giving, decorations and lights, holiday parties, goodwill, and generosity. Most of the symbolism has nothing to do with Christianity or Jesus. Christmas trees are originally a pagan Germanic tradition. Santa Claus is a mythological figure. Gift-giving is a pagan midwinter tradition. Holly and mistletoe are pre-Christian winter solstice plants. Christmas as practiced today is a secular cultural celebration. Muslim communities are growing in the Western world. More Muslim families, more Muslim children, more integration into Western society. And every December, the same thing happens. The entire society around them enters celebration mode. Schools have holiday parties. Workplaces have Christmas decorations. Neighborhoods are lit up. Family gatherings happen. It's joyous. It's unifying. It brings people together. And Muslim children watch all of this and are told, this is forbidden. You can't participate. You're different. You're separate. Their classmates exchange gifts. Their neighbors decorate their homes. Everyone around you is happy, sharing, connecting. And they are told, all of this is forbidden for you. You can't say Merry Christmas. You can't exchange gifts. You can't put up decorations. You can't participate in this moment of collective joy. Why? Because it's forbidden. But deep down, the child questions, how can something that brings this much joy, that unites this many people, that expresses generosity and love, how can that be forbidden in Islam? And the answer they get, because it's a Christian holiday, doesn't satisfy them. Because they can see, it's not really about religion anymore. It's about community. When you constantly tell young Muslims no to what everyone around them celebrates, you create division. Not just religious division, social division, cultural division, psychological division. These children grow up feeling isolated from their society, different in a way that feels wrong, disconnected from their peers, like their faith is about restriction, not connection. This is exactly the opposite of what the Quran teaches. The Quran says, there is no compulsion in religion. The Quran says, for you is your religion, and for me is my religion. The Quran says, good deeds wipe away evil deeds. The Quran teaches coexistence, connection, respect. But the scholarly ruling on Christmas teaches isolation. Muslims in the West are often portrayed as separate, as others, as not belonging. And then Muslim leadership reinforces this by telling Muslims, you must separate yourselves. You cannot participate in their celebrations. You have cut yourselves out from this part of society. All of us Muslims always ask for special treatment, but then at the same time refuse to integrate. This creates exactly what we need less of: more walls between communities. What we actually need: more bridges. The distinction is clear. The Quran forbids participation in shirk-based religious rituals, but it does not forbid cultural celebrations that do not involve religious beliefs. There's a clear difference. Religious Christmas is going to church. believing Jesus is God's Son, worshiping Jesus as divine, accepting the Trinity. Cultural secular Christmas is putting up a tree and decorations, giving gifts, spending time with family, acknowledging someone's celebration. The Quran forbids the first. It permits the second. The question that is asked the most every year: can Muslims say, "Merry Christmas"? The Quran commands, when you are greeted with a greeting, greet in return with what is better than it, or at least return the same. Quran chapter 4 verse 86. It doesn't say, only an Islamic greeting, just greeting. What the Quran actually says about living with others. The Quran teaches, maintain your faith, respect others' faith, don't commit shirk, don't be disrespectful, use wisdom in context, build bridges, not walls, saying Merry Christmas, wisdom, exchanging gifts, not forbidden, participating in your community's joy, actually aligned with Quranic values, maintaining your Islamic beliefs, still completely intact. These aren't contradictory. So is Christmas forbidden? If it's religious Christmas, celebrating Jesus as divine, yes, that's shirk. If it's secular Christmas, family, gifts, community, no, it's not in the Quran. And to the Muslims watching this, who feel torn between your faith and your community, your faith isn't about isolation. It's about integrity. Your faith isn't about saying no to joy. It's about saying yes to principles. Your faith isn't about building walls. It's about building bridges while staying true to yourself. You can celebrate Christmas from an Islamic perspective. There is nothing in the Quran that forbids participating in the secular aspects of Christmas. It even sets a precedent for it. You can say Merry Christmas without committing shirk. You can exchange gifts without abandoning Islam. You can be part of society's joy without being separate from your faith. The Quran supports this. Scholars restrict it. Know the difference. The Quran is complete, but tradition has added layers that aren't actually in the Quran. And in doing so, we've created unnecessary division at a time when we need unity most. If this made you reconsider what the Quran actually says about celebration and community, like this video. Subscribe for more deep dives into what the Quran actually says versus what tradition claims it says. And in the comments, what's your take? Should Muslims engage more openly with celebrating Christmas from an Islamic perspective? How do we balance faith with belonging? Think about it.